morning, everyone. We will call the work session for December 12th, 2022 to order. And I'm going to immediately recess briefly for the pension trustees. So I'll call to order the pension trustees, item 2.1. Any amendments to the minutes? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Any citizens to be heard for the pension trustees on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, item 4.1.
Good morning, Billy Kirkpatrick, HR Director. This request is to approve the new hires and for acceptance into the pension plan as listed.
Any questions? Motion?
Motion to approve agenda item 4.1.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 4.2.
This request is to approve the request of employees to vest their pension as provided by section 2.419 of the employee's pension plan.
Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve item 4.2.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 4.3.
And approve the request of employees for a regular pension as provided by sections 2.416 and 2.424 of the employee's pension plan.
Any questions? Motion?
Move to approve agenda 4.3.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Anything else for directors' reports? All right, we will adjourn the pension trustees and reconvene the work session. Item 3.1.
Establish a Ready for 100 goal in which the city aims to transition 100% of electricity consumed in city operations to clean energy by 2040 and 100% of electricity consumed citywide to clean energy by 2050. Adopt Resolution 22-22.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Sheridan Jamont, Sustainability Coordinator. This morning we will be taking a deeper dive into the resolution and specifically the two targets that it sets for both municipal energy and community-wide electricity, I should say specifically. So the first target of the resolution is that it will be the goal and policy of the City of Clearwater that 100% of all electricity consumed in city operations be clean energy by 2040. And there are 4 pathways that we've identified to achieve this. The first is Duke Clean Energy Connection Program. In 2020, the city enrolled 40% of its total municipal electricity consumption in Duke's Clean Energy Connection Program. The power generated by the solar facilities feed into Duke Energy electric grid across Florida, and the city will receive a monthly bill credit associated with the amount of solar energy our share produces. Accounts with large consumption levels or that exist in locations not suitable for on-site solar or behavior change programs, such as water and wastewater treatment facilities, lift stations, and traffic signals, have been prioritized for enrollment. At the end of this 30-year program, Duke projects we will experience a reduced total expense of over $4.6 million. The next is our energy conservation program. So in 2021, the city began a 5-year energy conservation program with Synergistic. The company conservatively projects it will be able to reduce energy consumption in city facilities by 20% during this period. This would reduce the city's total municipal electricity consumption by roughly 5% and is expected to reduce expenses by a net total of over $5.1 million. Another pathway would be on-site solar. So in 2021, the city began a solar feasibility study to determine the best locations for solar array across various city properties. If the city were to install on-site solar on each of the 34 locations that have been determined to be favorable by the study, this would result in a potential 10 to 20% offset of the city's total municipal electricity consumption. And according to the study, the average solar array expected cost is about $280,000. The average total expected savings per array over the 30-year lifespan of the array is $1.1 million, just over $1.1 million. With the Representative Christ appropriations and ARPA funds, we will have nearly $3 million set aside for solar installation on city facilities. This is expected to achieve the installation of solar on 12 city facilities and a 7% rough offset of the city's total electricity consumption. Additional funding would be needed to meet the 10 to 20% target at an estimated $1.3 to $5.6 million in costs, and the decision to install will be based on financial and environmental returns on investment. Areas to potentially expand solar arrays into include using alternative systems like parking lot canopies and ground mount systems on parklands and undeveloped parcels. After implementing these three approaches, the city would need to determine pathways to achieving a 35 to 45% reduction or offset of its total municipal electricity consumption. Possible pathways include really focusing on energy efficiency upgrades. So routine repair and replacement of equipment will happen regardless of clean energy commitments. These practices will reduce the amount of electricity the city consumes in its operations without adding significant additional cost. In addition to these routine upgrades, energy reductions can be achieved by the investment in technologies to improve energy efficiency beyond normal repair and replacement, specifically prioritizing equipment in our water and wastewater treatment operations, by investigating additional forms of renewable energy generation beyond solar on city properties, and through the decisions related to the implementation of the public utilities master plans. They also have the potential for energy reduction just because those operations are a large consumer of electricity for the city. Additionally, in 2019, Duke Energy announced its goal of achieving a 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and a 100% reduction in carbon emissions by 2050. While this is not exactly a commitment to generating electricity from 100% renewable energy, it will greatly increase the amount of renewable energy within the utility's electrical grid mix. This will make it easier for municipalities to achieve their Ready for 100 targets for both municipal operations and community-wide consumption. So the next and second target of the resolution is to achieve 100% clean energy electricity citywide by 2050. And it says here, it's further the goal and policy of the City of Clearwater that 100% of all electricity consumed citywide be clean energy by 2050. And the resolution specifically has 3 ways of achieving this, or 3 ways that we would follow according to the resolution, and what's required by the resolution. The first is that the city manager would work with residents, businesses, utility partners, and community stakeholders to identify an approach and set benchmarks, paraphrasing here a little bit. The second is that the city manager will add clean energy goals to Greenprint 2.0 and provide an update on progress every 2 years. And the third is that inclusivity, equity, and economic opportunity will be prioritized for frontline and disenfranchised communities in the planning process and the implementation process as well. It is difficult to project possible costs without knowing the specific strategies that would be utilized, let alone the expected level of public adoption, energy costs, and technology availability. Various grant funding also exists to support municipalities in pursuit of this target. Financial requirements from the city could include staff time, the creation of grant programs for residents and businesses, and continued nonprofit support funding to entities like Solar United Neighbors and the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Can we get this presentation?
Yes.
I would have loved to have seen it previously, but any other questions or comments?
Mayor, I have one quick comment. The resolution, there is a difference between the resolution and the presentation. And the resolution that was sent forward by the EAB includes, the language that directs our staff to do certain things. The sustainability coordinator is called out as updating Greenprint, those sorts of things. The staff is recommending the resolution, but we're recommending it with the change of changing those things to city manager rather than sustainability coordinator or general staff, just to be more consistent with that.
Okay. And Mr. Margolis, can you differentiate a goal versus a policy?
Not really, because a policy, although it may seem like it has enforcement power, really does not, except by will of council. And so ultimately, the remedies are the same either way. If a goal is not met, then council holds, staff, whether it's me, manager, et cetera, accountable in the same way that you would for a violation of a policy. So at the end of it, I don't see much of a meaningful distinction because it's ultimately council's prerogative and how you choose to enforce it, or if you choose to enforce it.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Well, it's a resolution, so we'll be hearing that on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
4.1,
Approve the contract with Pinellas Community Foundation for the ARPA funds for distribution to organizations to provide services for housing and social service needs.
Thank you, Chuck Lane. Economic Development Housing Department, excuse me. On August 4th, City Council approved a staff recommendation for distribution of American Rescue Plan Act funds, ARPA funds. Included in that distribution is $1 million to Pinellas Community Foundation. They'll distribute those funds to organizations capable of providing emergency services to residents with housing and social service needs. This contract establishes the terms of Pinellas Community Foundation's distribution of these funds. The agreement runs through December 31st, 2026, and may be terminated sooner, or we also have an option in there to extend for one more year. Excuse me. Pinellas Community Foundation will administer a competitive process to procure grants with qualifying organizations. The contract provides for PCF to receive $100,000 up front. This will allow them to be nimble in providing funds to these organizations. PCF will submit monthly requests to the Housing Division staff for reimbursement of expenses. So the $100,000 will serve as a revolving fund, so service providers are paid quickly. The Pinellas Community Foundation doesn't have to dip into their own funds to make payments to service providers. A quick change to the contract. The contract, as it reads now, provides PCF to receive an administrative fee of 10% of funds expended. I'll make a change to that contract to clarify that they will bill us for direct administrative costs not to exceed 10% of funds expended. That amount will likely be less than 10%, but the contract won't allow it to exceed 10%. Doug Cooley, the CEO of Pinellas Community Foundation, is here this morning. Should you have any questions for him, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
any questions for Mr. Lane? Vice Mayor.
I have a question about the change from the 10% administrative fee to bill directly. Can you explain why and the rationale for that?
Well, I think it's good practice. I mean, that's how we do our administrative costs. I think it was an issue that was raised, and I talked about it with Mr. Cooley this morning. When we take administrative costs in the funds we have to represent that we incurred those expenses, and then we draw the money. So it's not uncommon for it to happen that way.
I just get concerned a little bit about nonprofits and the capacity and how stretched they are, and does this add more tedious work for them to, obviously they know where the money goes, and they also know what their administrative costs are, but, I mean, my experience, which is not as much as yours, Chuck, but it's certainly experience with the COC and the HLA and their grants. I mean, I don't have evidence that people send in monthly reports that they have a kind of a flat 10% administrative fee. I mean, when our Economic Development Housing Department gets grants, there's a flat 10% administrative fee there, right?
Well, we have to represent that we've incurred those costs.
Right.
And we can draw less. We try to draw all of those administrative costs because we need them. But we have to represent that we've incurred those costs.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, obviously, we have to account for those, but as long as it doesn't put, some undue burden on the Pinellas Community Foundation, whatever.
Well, I talked to Mr. Cooley about this before the meeting, and, this is a zero-sum game. So everything that they don't experience over if they only experience 5% costs, that means $50,000 more is going to these other not-for-profits.
Right.
So, I think our ultimate goal is to get as much money. Certainly, you want more money to housing and social services. That means more money is going to go to their bottom line.
Yep.
So So I don't know how we can argue with that if the organization that's administrating it is happy with the arrangement. And I really appreciate what the Pinellas Community Foundation is doing on our behalf and these not-for-profits.
I do too. I have a couple of other questions. So we have about $200,000 in interest earned from our ARPA funds. Are those part of this bucket? Are we gonna, where is that $200,000?
I'm not sure of where that's going. There was $1 million that was allocated to
Right.
this, and that's what
Right.
this contract represents.
Right. I mean, I just, can we have a discussion about where that's going? What bucket it's gonna go into?
It doesn't even have to go into the ARPA bucket. It can go into our general fund.
Correct.
So,
I think we need a discussion about that, because that money's out there, and I'd like it to be used in the ways that ARPA, was written. I also have some questions on the agreement, just a couple. And it's more about under the deliverables. So Pinellas Community Foundation is going to create a competitive selection process and disperse these funds. And I just wanted to know what that competitive process might look like. How are we going to evaluate? Who's going to evaluate? So I'm assuming there's a notice of funding, there's a due date for those responses to get back. Hopefully we have a real aggressive, expansive community outreach to organizations, and then they respond. Then what are the things that we value when the $1 million gets distributed? And I'm thinking about things like, okay, are the providers located in Clearwater? Is that, a bonus point? Do we want to work with real small providers who have some newer innovative ideas? Or do we want to go with kind of tried and true people that have capacity? Do we want to spread it both ways? Do we want to have maybe 100,000 for smaller projects? Do we want any kind of community engagement as far as looking at what's been proposed and giving any kind of feedback? Do we value DEI in an organization, that kind of thing? So
Well, the contract doesn't go into that level of detail, obviously.
our contract doesn't.
This
Right.
contract, yes. So in communications with Mr. Cooley, really the bottom line is, they're gonna select the organizations that do the most good. So whether it's a couple of larger contracts, several smaller contracts, they're gonna evaluate the proposals and decide on what is the best thing for our residents. So that's what's gonna do the most help, provide the most help. So I know that's a very general answer to your question. If Mr. Cooley, if you want to have any questions of Mr. Cooley, but right now, it's about, let's get this together, let's work through it. We'll answer some questions along the way, because this is new.
Councilmember Albrecht.
Now, I could just tell the Vice Mayor that they did this very well. I mean, I was with the Senior Citizen Services, and we actually were absorbed by Pinellas Community, and that's what we did. We had a big committee that did this, and for our funding of senior services, and Pinellas Community did it so much better. They really look at, you ought to go in and see there, if you've never been there, and see the facility and meet the people there.
I have. Actually, I sit next to Duggan monthly. He and I serve on the COC board. So we're in meetings multiple times a month. I've been at the Pinellas Community Foundation. I have utmost respect for Duggan and the Pinellas Community Foundation. So I know that they have the capacity and ability, and I trust them. I just wonder if we need to give a little direction about what some of our priorities or goals are, because we can direct that a little bit and give them some guidance. Do we want some smaller providers to be given a chance to get in the game and help the community a little bit? So, that's what I was thinking about, or we just leave all evaluation up to the Pinellas Community Foundation. Hey, Duggan.
Good morning. For the record, Devin Cooley with the Pinellas Community Foundation. I would say that if council members have suggestions about things that you'd want in the process, we're open to that. And if you want to have very brief one-on-one meetings to know how the process is exactly going to get deployed and work, and you have suggestions before we launch that, we'd be happy to hear from every one of you.
If we're gonna give direction, we'll give it as a body, which
Thank you.
would require us putting it on a separate work session and actually giving some criteria that all 5 of us, or at least 3 of us, agree upon.
We're happy to bring that to you, bring you a process, and then at a work session, go ahead and get that, workshopped with you. I'm happy to do that. The other piece is, this is going to go in 2 parts, and one of them is going to speed up faster than the other. Because part of this is, there's a desire to address the issues at Capri Mobile Home Park and the closure of that, which needs to happen very quickly because that'll be closing in March. But then the rest of the process will take just a little bit longer, not too long, but work session would have to be scheduled as early on as possible if you want feedback to that. And we're happy to work on your timetable, but want to be sensitive to getting things done quickly.
So we would either have to have a special work session, or it would have to be at the only meeting that we have in January. So that's the issue.
And if it's okay with you, we could do that for sort of the rest of the grant process. We want to sort of get stuff ready to go and run with Capri Mobile Home Park. That really is selecting
Right.
a group to get the help out there.
So that's Monday the 9th.
We'd be happy to work with you to make it work.
Then, Mr. Jennings, I think we ought to put an agenda item on the 9th, please. And we'll just defer this then until that point.
Well, I would suggest we get the contract in place so we can start working on Capri. The details that you'll discuss with Doug on the 9th, I think are more specific and not captured in the contract.
So how much of this tranche of money are you hoping to put towards Capri?
Up to $250,000. Not to
Okay.
exceed that.
Is everybody amenable to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will amend it to administrative costs, not to exceed 100,000, not to exceed $250,000 for Capri, and we'll have a work session on the balance of the grant on the 9th. Okay?
And they still get the 100,000 up front to start the work,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
And that's really for grants. That's to go out the door.
Consent?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kugler. 4.2.
Approve the City of Clearwater's fiscal year 2021-2022 consolidated annual performance and evaluation report.
Thank you. Because we receive annual allocations of Home Investment Partnership Program funding and Community Development Block Grant funding from HUD, we're required to submit a consolidated annual performance and evaluation report. Acronym, of course, is the CAPER. It's due December 30th of each year. This year's report captures the program year beginning on October 1st, 2021 and ending on September 30th, 2022. The CAPER contains information to assess the following: assessment of our goals and outcomes, resources and investments, affordable housing, homeless and other special needs, public housing, actions to address barriers to affordable housing, and monitoring. The main purpose of the CAPER is to document our use of federal funds, which of course are CDBG and home. In the narrative sections of the report, we discuss our accomplishments using state and local funds, so this report ends up being more representative of our entire body of work in the housing division. Through the CDBG and home programs, we spent $1,375,885. We also spent an additional $988,750 in state and local funds, and we spent $230,225 in CDBG CV, an allocation from HUD specifically to address impacts from COVID-19 pandemic. So what did we accomplish? Under very challenging home buyer conditions, we closed 7 down payment assistance loans totaling $296,300. We completed a major rehabilitation at Lexington Club at Renaissance Square. Our contribution was $300,000, but this helped to leverage a much larger investment in the rehabilitation of all 240 units at the site. As you know, we have a strong relationship with Habitat for Humanity. They completed 9 new single-family homes in the program year. We funded 2 of them with CHIP funding. We spent nearly $600,000 on 14 public facilities projects. Some carried over from the previous year. Others are carrying over to the current fiscal year. These projects supported nonprofit service providers such as Salvation Army, our club, St. Vincent de Paul, Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services, Directions for Living, and others. CDBG funding was also used to support the project at Belmont Park, which you're all aware of. We spent $166,500 to support 8 public services. We're allowed to spend up to 15% of our CDBG allocation on public services. We funded Kimberly Homes, St. Vincent de Paul Community Kitchen Resource Center, Gulf Coast Legal Services, Hispanic Outreach Center, Pinellas Ex-Offender Reentry Coalition, West Care, Florida, Pinellas Opportunity Council's Shore Services Program, and Hope Villages of America's Grace House. We funded that until they changed the use of that facility earlier this year, last program year. With CDBG CV funding, Suncoast Housing Connections provided mortgage assistance and foreclosure counseling. The Homeless Leadership Alliance provided housing navigation services, and Directions for Living helped relocate seniors from the former Prospect Towers that could not afford the increased rents. We provided just over $107,000 to Prospera and Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation to provide education and technical assistance to Clearwater business owners and hopeful entrepreneurs. We provided $26,325 to Suncoast Housing Connections and Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services to provide homeowner education and counseling. 151 Clearwater residents took advantage of this program. And as you know, we contributed $250,000 in general funds to 6 organizations working on the fight against homelessness. We collect accomplishments throughout the year so we can track the number of people we served. Overall, at one level or another, we assisted 21,787 individuals, 175 households, and 18 businesses. We'll present this item tomorrow at the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and I will ask them to recommend council approval of this document. Tomorrow will serve as one of 2 public hearings. The second public hearing will be on Thursday when you are asked to take action on this item. I'll take questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lane? Vice Mayor?
So I appreciate all this work. I think, because I have a lot of questions about these things, it'd be nice to have a one-on-one before, so we can sit down, so I won't go through every single thing, but a couple of things. Funds not expended from this year's budget will be programmed in future years. So we've got, through CDBG and home program activities, total expenditures were over $1 million for 21-22. Are providers in our community asking for more funding?
They always do, but providers, you have to understand, a very important part of CDBG and funding providers' services, we can only fund a certain amount, and we're very restricted about what we can spend on services. And that's really where the need is. We end up funding the providers more so on the public facility side, and and that helps a great deal, but direct services, it's very competitive how we do it to begin with.
Right. When we have, when you have a list of notable accomplishments utilizing federal, state, and local funds, can at some point I have a breakdown of which ones are federal, which ones are state, and which are local funds that are going to these things? And then as far as this first legislative text, we've contributed $100,000 through the city's general fund to Pinellas Safe Harbor, HEP, HLA, Pinellas Hope, Salvation Army, and RCS. That number has been static for 12 years, is that correct?
You mean the 250,000?
Yeah, well, yeah, right.
I believe at one point it was at 235, but it's been 250, I think, since about 2012.
Okay. And then when we go into the CAPER draft, so we have a goal 2 of housing, and that's what we've heard time and time again that our residents are most concerned about, and it's the most challenging problem we have here, right? In Clearwater, in Pinellas, in Florida, in the nation. And so we've got these goals of, during fiscal year 21-22, the city of Clearwater planned to construct 111 rental units, rehab 12 rental units, construct 14 homeowner units, and on and on. And we've, constructed 0 rental units and, pardon?
With the federal money.
Yeah, again, so I need to be, clear about that, right? Because we helped with the Habitat homes, so we have
Yes.
a couple of those, right? And then some of these outcomes are really striking. On our community development and public services, the city assisted 7,169 persons, 203% of the goal, with public facility or infrastructure activity. Can you give me an example of this? What program was this that
This is through the Public Facilities Program. They report how many people they assist through that facility to us, how many Clearwater people they assist. And that's what we base these numbers on. It's very hard to predict them, so that they're kind of all over the place when we get accomplishments. But I think, by and large, I think the numbers are pretty good in terms, some are much lower than expected, some are much higher. But I think across the board, I think we did a pretty good job at meeting the numbers.
So if we help with HVAC at St. Vincent de Paul, or help with a new kitchen, something at, or lighting at Directions for Living, or whatever they've asked for, right? Then we count all those bodies that go through the door as people we helped?
Clearwater
Okay.
people, yes. That's how
Well,
we're-
Clearwater people that go through the door?
Clearwater people, yes. That's how we're required to report.
Okay,
for HUD.
okay. And then if we look on page 3 with these goals, like for economic development, we have jobs created, retained, we have expected strategic plan of 400, and we have zeros across the line. So what are these numbers, here? Who sets the goals? And there are a number where we haven't reached a goal. So who sets those numbers, and why have they not been reached, especially on page 4?
Well, and I'm not looking at the page.
Okay.
The goals are set in our consolidated, in our con plan, the larger stated goals. With economic development, it's really how we report them, and that's where we don't report jobs created, because that's not how the activities are set up with those two organizations for economic development. We report people served. So it's really the matrix code we use in our reporting system with HUD as to how we capture it, as to how we count them. And it gets a little complicated, but we're very kind of pigeonholed in how we can count these people based on how the activity is set up.
Okay. So I think we need to have I need to understand why this is public-facing, why this document is here, the CAPER draft, page 4, with all of these zeros, and what those numbers, really mean. Is it related to federal funds that come down, SHIP funds that come down? Again, who's setting goals and why are we not meeting them? It's not on you. It's just understanding. When we look at this, who wouldn't be shocked, right?
I have to tell you, I don't believe it's us coming up short on our goals. It's how they get reported, and in the CAPER, these tables you're talking about, they pull the information automatically from the reporting system. It's not something we set up or put in. It's complicated, but I can tell you, I think we're doing a really good job with our CDBG funds.
Any other?
Need to be able to communicate it, understand it and communicate it. Sorry.
Anyone else? All right, we'll hear that on Thursday. Thank you, Mr. Lane. You're doing a great job. 5.1.
Approve a contract with Tool Design Group in the amount of $268,735 to develop new Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Morning, I'm Carrie Marcellek. I'm the Senior Program Manager with Parks and Recreation, and I'm delighted to bring this item forward to you today. We're fortunate in Clearwater we have an extensive system of parks and recreation. We've seen time and time again that the City Council, the community, everyone supports parks and recreation, and they sincerely appreciate what that means to their quality of life. So in 2002, we did a master plan that proposed projects as well as programs for a 20-year time frame. In 2013, we had to update that plan because there were different changes and different things that were unexpected and not included in the plan that were simply unforeseen. So the 20-year plan has ended. So now it's time to do our next plan. And with this new master plan, we're excited to propose to engage Tool Design to develop the master plan. And this will advance future strategic initiatives and projects undertaken by our Parks and Recreation Department. And there's 6 different steps to the plan. We have a robust community workshop component. we have 3 in person, 1 virtual. We have focus group meetings, which will be a day with multiple groups, stakeholder meetings. We have an online survey component, and different components like that we hope to hear from the community to make sure their needs and requests are included as part of that process. We anticipate this process to take 12 months, and it will begin in early 2023. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Vice Mayor?
This looks exciting. I think it'll be a great process to get our residents involved. I had just a couple questions on, the team looks great, their bios. And so it's piggybacking off of Forward Pinellas, but it's really Forward Pinellas that has some top 20 firms that they're recommending.
Yes.
And so it looks like Sarasota is the closest locale. Did you reach out and talk to anyone in Sarasota or, their references?
What we did initially was we reviewed 20 master plans that have been completed in the state of Florida for the last 8 years. And one of the plans that really rose to the top was Sarasota's plan. And Tool Design did that plan. And I personally really loved it. And we did talk briefly with a planner that was involved in the plan from Sarasota County, and they spoke very supportively of working with Tool and working with the kind of the complex professionals and their approach that were involved with the plan with Tool.
Great, thank you.
The 2002 plan versus this one, I'm assuming is going to be relatively different, because back then, we didn't have all the facilities we have today. The Long Center wasn't in our, suite of facilities. We didn't have North Greenwood, Ross Norton, Morningside as it is, or Countryside. Everything got built after that.
Right.
So how will this differ in kind of the end result? Are we going to look more at the service side and where trends are, in Parks and Rec and trails and, athletics and everything else?
Yes, that's one of the components. One of the requirements not only of our master plan, or one of the goals of our master plan, is to look at those user trends, not only in this region but nationally, as well as just to explore what are the requests of the community now, 20 years later, and we expect to hear a need for more supportive or programmatic type services, and not necessarily for new buildings, because that was certainly a need back in 2002, and we expect not to hear that need. Certainly the commitment to renovation and our capital improvement plan will definitely be something that will be included, as it should be. But to build new buildings, it's unlikely that will be a majority request.
And the senior center is included in this as well, right?
Yes, the senior center is included in that. And certainly in 2002, that was one of the requests that was made, was Clearwater didn't have a senior center. And then since then, of course, the Aging Well Center was included, or was renovated at the Long Center and is doing very well. So I would be surprised if we were asked for another senior center, because we've been replicating programs at all of our centers based on that center's need.
Councilmember Albritton?
So let me understand this. I know that we've kind of pulled off services from Parks and Rec. Into public, what is the name of it, John? Public
Works?
Public Works.
Public Works. Are they doing, is Parks and Rec still maintaining landscaping, or is Public Works, does that fall into Public Works?
Parks and Recreation.
Still on the landscaping. So my concern, back in 2002, we had a real drive to plant trees. And, it was very important back then. I remember hearing it from everybody. And one of the things, and I love trees, but it seemed like maybe we planted them in the wrong location, because now we're seeing 20 years later the effects of that near sidewalks, when we're having to replace miles of sidewalks that tree roots have pushed up. I wanted to just make sure that when we look at that we can still be a tree community, but I want to really make sure where we plant them, it's not going to cause future problems like it did over the last 20 years.
I think certainly in this plan, we will hear without question from the community the need and the interest of planting trees, and certainly the environmental impacts, positive impacts of planting trees will be voiced, and we all share them. As to where they're planted, we will give careful thought to that, as we have in the past, to make sure the longer view is taken into account as it relates to too close to a sidewalk, too close to whatever as the roots grow. So that will be a part of the discussion. That longer view is so important. And in a plan like this, we can do that. That is what we're required to do or supposed to do.
Okay.
Any other questions? Consent?
Yes.
5.2. Thank you, Carrie.
Approve a venue license agreement between the City of Clearwater and Ruth Eckerd Hall to provide quality venue management services and ticketing services and food and beverage services at the Waterfront Amphitheater venue.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Jim Hallius, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm here today to discuss the item for the venue license agreement between the City of Clearwater and Ruth Eckerd Hall. Joining us today from Ruth Eckerd Hall are CEO Susan Crockett, and Bobby Rossi is here as well to answer any questions you may have about the operations of the hall per this agreement. And I'm going to actually hand it off to our city manager, Mr. Jennings, as he was the lead negotiator along with City Attorney Margolis on this project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you, Mr. Hallius.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The city and Ruth Eckerd Hall have been working over the last few months to develop an operation agreement license that will allow the city to recoup the funding that's needed to cover the bond payment, and at the same time make sure that Ruth Eckerd Hall will have the support and the opportunity to make this a fantastic success. And that's really what the whole point of the negotiations that we entered into in the beginning. It is in the interest of the city and Ruth Eckerd to make sure this is very, very successful. Hence the reason why I know I've had a few questions as to why there is not a monthly retaining fee or monthly fee. We felt as though that certainly in the beginning of any new venture, a business or certainly a nonprofit needs to be able to get off the ground and make this very successful. So I did not recommend burdening them up front with a monthly or an annual fee. But what we did do is we put together a back-end success fee that I believe in the end of the day will be much more lucrative for the city in terms of the repayment, because I have great belief in Ruth Eckerd's ability to make this incredibly successful. So that's one element of it. Now this is an interesting set of circumstances because we have the outlines of a venue right now, but we don't have the venue in place. So it has been difficult to negotiate some of the parameters, but I will say that Ruth Eckerd Hall has been incredibly amenable to the requests that the city has made, in terms of ticketing, in terms of sponsorship. The city retains all rights to sell the naming rights to the venue and any fixed assets inside the venue. So Ruth Eckerd will have the responsibility of really sponsorships as it relates to events, concerts, so forth. They'll also be able to bring in vendors as they see fit. But in terms of the hard physical assets in the facility, that will be up to the city to be able to recoup the needed funds to cover the bond payment. With that said, we were hoping to bring the superlative agreement today as well in order to assist with the sale of the naming rights and other sponsorship opportunities. We plan to bring that in January. I will say again, Ruth Eckert has been terrific in working with us and Superlative, certainly trying to work through any questions or limitations that either party may experience. So we feel as though that we're in a pretty good place. While this doesn't reflect a third party, we feel as though we're in a good place with Ruth Eckert, with the city, and with Superlative, if the council does support that. Overall, we asked to have a minimum number of events, 35, in order for us to have a sense that this is going to be a very vibrant and exciting opportunity for the city overall. I certainly believe that Ruth Eckert will far exceed the 35 events as it relates. One of the other issues has been the historical or legacy events that we've had over the years as a city. Ruth Eckert has agreed to certainly work with and provide the dates for the Clearwater Jazz Holiday, which has been traditionally in October, and I think third week in October, and so there will be other community groups that want to use the venue as well. The way we've constructed this agreement has been that instead of the city being in the middle of all of that, we feel as though that the community groups should negotiate directly with Ruth Eckert Hall, with the exception of 10 specific called out events that the city reserves the rights. We also, in the agreement, called out July 4th, July 5th in case of a rain date. And so the 10 events, what we call city events, have not been determined. Those would be within consultation of the council and kind of determining what it is that those 10 events could be in the future. It could be any number of things that benefit the community. The community events, where Ruth Eckert would be working directly with community partners, that's where the city wouldn't necessarily be in the middle of those negotiations. This agreement is a licensing agreement for them to have control over the venue with the support of the city. So therefore, from a business standpoint, the city does not want to be an impediment to Ruth Eckert being successful with this venue. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, and Susan Crockett is here also to answer any questions as well.
Questions from council. Councilmember Teixeira.
Well, I find myself in an uncomfortable position. After months of negotiating, council received the final draft on Friday around 3 o'clock. My discomfort stems from the fact that I'm acutely aware that any further delays in this process will negatively impact Ruth Eckert Hall and their ability to successfully launch this amphitheater. And I feel this pressure to rubber stamp it. The saving grace is that we are working with Ruth Eckert Hall, an organization that I deeply respect, that I've worked with, and I have firsthand seen what a community partner they are and all the great work that they've done. So that gives me some comfort. Nonetheless, I do have some questions that I would like to have addressed. I guess for point 3.3, when it speaks about necessary actions to secure areas, specifically the fencing, if I can have some clarification, what does that fencing mean? Is it just around the stage, around the whole amphitheater? So just a clarification and explanation of what the fencing means and how that affects security and public restrictions.
Yes, and speaking to item 3.3, securing the venue, it is just fencing that goes around the venue per se, so the venue footprint, but the remainder of the park remains open and is not secured with fencing during concerts. So they'll, and I don't know if the attachment is on here, there's a map that we can get to you guys that outlines the fencing particularly for the venue. So when Ruth Eckerd has a concert going on, there's permanent fencing that's already in place that secures the venue, but access to the park and behind the venue along the water is still permissible, and it's we want it to be an active park, and it's going to remain active even when there is events going on within the venue itself.
So the covered canopy will not be available to the public unless, because of the fence, unless there's an event.
I don't know that we've had that internal discussion yet as far as the inside as far as the venue, and I'll turn it over to
Yeah, I think the current park plan, the last I saw, and we may need to revisit that between now and Thursday night, but there is sections of permanent fencing, decorative in style, around the amphitheater area, but the amphitheater is not a fenced-off location per se. I think, that we've gotten into the details of the agreement. I think, everyone would acknowledge a need to secure the facility, but the accommodation of the venue, the original concept was a series of permanent and non-permanent fencing locations. The permanent locations would be supplemented at event time to secure a paid event. So we can bring you that that plan for the fencing. It's in the documents, and then if that's of interest.
I would appreciate that, yeah. And then to clarify further, because it's being used all throughout the contract, city events versus community events, third-party events, it's been been mentioned, but for the record, if that could be clarified, what constitutes those? Community events versus city events?
Sure, the city events are the events that Manager Jennings spoke to, of the 10 events that we have. Those are our city events. Now, community events, that gets back to, again, what the manager stated, how we really don't want to get involved with certain community events, being the broker between the two entities. So those community events are, those events where it's a nonprofit. A perfect example, I think, would be the MLK parade that we have. That's considered a community event, so that community partner would in turn work with Ruth Eckerd Hall to secure the date. Of course, we would put them in touch and have those things. But as far as how things, this is new for us, because in the past it would just be them working out of Coachman Park. But in order for us to, again, not be an impediment for Ruth Eckerd and to really be able to let them kind of negotiate on behalf of themselves and with the event partner. So we have community events are the ones that are kind of our traditional events that happen within the community, and then the city events are 10 events that would be of your choosing that we may bring to you. Hey, this is an idea we have for an item, and then that's where that's.
So Hispanic Heritage Festival would fall under one of the city events.
Exactly.
Or Sea Blues.
Exactly.
And obviously we've got to carve out for Jazz Holiday. But if Clearwater High wanted to move their graduation from Daycare Ballpark over to the amphitheater because of the covering, that would be a community event.
Exactly.
And one last thing. Let's see, 3.7, the last sentence. However, any closure of Drew Street westbound lanes shall be accomplished in the way that maintains current levels of ingress and egress from the Sandcastle Religious Retreat and the Osceola at Sandcastle. Why is this included in this contract? It's a contract between Ruth Eckerd Hall and the city of Clearwater. I would think that this would apply to all properties surrounding the park. So why specifically include Sandcastle and Osceola?
Reasoning for that is that in years past, when we have events that go south of Osceola, there's that only one ingress and egress into the Sandcastle, and we actually cut it down to one lane, is what we've done in the past, so to enable them to have access in there. So that was just something that, from an operational standpoint, for Ruth Eckerd to plan for, and also for the city to plan for, that those certain areas are not to be cordoned off or shut off, just because of the emergency access that needs to go in there, and then also the access to the sandcastle. Because behind the amphitheater as it is now, that's going to be the truck loading and unloading zone when the talent comes in. So they'll need to go in there, but they'll also need to ingress and egress up through Drew Street, so we just can't have that shut down.
And this can't be a separate thing, like it has to be included in this. I just find it so odd that this is included in a two-party agreement.
I would
Actually,
defer to the city attorney and the city manager on that.
to actually like set aside a sentence just for these two entities. I just find it odd. It should be a separate thing. It shouldn't be included in this. In my opinion, it's odd. It's inappropriate, in my opinion, to include these two and single them out in this contract. And so I'm gonna ask a question to Mr. Margolis if I can. Having this in this contract, does it open us up for liability, let's say, if it was blocked for 5 or 10 minutes and these two buildings feel that they get upset and they will perhaps sue, does that enable us to be more in a liability situation?
It is an enforceable commitment that's being made to them. The general rule in contracts is the concept of privity of contract, meaning that for the most part, only the parties to a contract can enforce an agreement. However, there are exceptions to that rule, as there are many things in law, and this, in my opinion, would fall within one of those exceptions. I do believe that the church could enforce that provision if they so chose.
I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I would like to have that last sentence removed.
Councilmember Albrecht.
A couple questions. In the background, right off on the license agreement, it says 4,000 seats covered and then 5,000, additional lawn seating of 5, so that's 9,000. So how does that play out in the, let's say, the Jazz Holiday when we have larger group than that? How do we accommodate that?
You know, they have certain areas that they can look at, but it's basically, that's kind of as moving forward, that was the niche that we felt that we were going to be successful at, was that 9,000 seat total, the 4,000 covered and the 5,000 on the lawn. So, you know, I guess that's an accommodation that they'll have to make going forward. I don't know how their VIP sections work. That may pick up some things in the background area that they look to do, but as, you know, kind of desired as we went forward through this process, that was the sweet spot that was determined, was that 4,000 covered in the 5,000. I'll turn it over to Mr. Delk if you have anything to add.
Well, I think the nature of our discussion over the history of this project has been that the balance of the park would be open and accessible to the public during ticketed events. So outside the venue, the park will still be open for business.
We do have that large, exceptionally large green area that, I don't know if it has a great view of the stage, but I'm sure you'd hear the music there. So under, let's see here, 2.2A, brand development. I know there was discussions going back and forth about superlative with a lot of our other properties and how that Ruth Eckerd would handle this particular one. It seems like I'm reading here that Ruth Eckerd now has marketing, they're responsible for the marketing of the venue and the naming rights and all that. Is that, am I reading that right?
Yeah, so the brand development, 2.2A, and I would ask Susan to speak to, because this is specifically Ruth Eckerd's request, but naming rights and all of that belongs to the city. But I know in our early discussions, there was an interest in kind of coming up with a
Correct.
name. So
Correct. Susan Crockett, CEO, Ruth Eckerd Hall. Yes, we have actually engaged a professional branding company to help us in terms of launching the venue. And that includes stylizing the name, the delivery of the logo, the teaser campaign for it, as well as the rest of the marketing, because we need to do institutional marketing for the venue itself to get it out and launched into this community as well as into our industry. So that's what that's responding to when we talk about marketing and branding the venue.
Just the venue, just the venue itself. Okay.
Correct.
Correct, but the naming rights are all retained by the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Okay. I'm going to just start by saying I would echo Councilmember Techeda's concerns about feeling pushed into a corner and not enough time to have robust, engaged conversations and interact with the public to get some feedback on some of these things that are in the contract. And so that's a discussion for another time. We're here where we're here. But it's wholly unacceptable, I think. It's not fair to anyone. And so because of that, I'm going to narrow down my significant number of concerns to 3 big ones, but I will echo your concern about naming the sandcastle and those 2 properties highly inappropriate. It's not necessary, I think. I think, as Mr. Halio said, we're not going to block anybody's ingress or egress for safety reasons. And so to have something identified by that particular name is, to me, it was incredibly jarring. And secondly, we've got Water's Edge and other residences. If we want to just say, no structures will be overly, I don't know, will be blocked or whatever you want in some general term, but still it's like a duh, we're not going to do that. And so why is it there? I fully agree. My 3 big concerns are certainly, the number one are the financials. And so we're back here on the 5.2, 5.3. And, to have this park that we have a $30 million bond on that we have to start paying, and John said, working with Ruth Eckerd Hall over the last few months to develop a license that will allow the city to recoup the bond payment. I think, Mr. Margolis, $1.3 million a year?
The bond payment is 1.6.
1.6. Okay, and then we're responsible for maintenance, which, let's just call it $2 million a year payment to just have this park here, regardless of any profits that we might be having. And so if the goal is to develop a license that will allow us to recoup $2 million a year and that Ruth Eckerd Hall will make it a success, I'm fully on board with that. We've got no information, no pro forma, no numbers, no financials, about how we are going to be, to ensure that we're receiving $2 million a year, so we're at least breaking even. And I get that people take time to build up, but using words like, I believe this, and that, we believe that it will be more lucrative and all this stuff. Believing is one thing, I believe too, but I want things in a contract in black and white about financials. I want to see a pro forma, I want numbers, and it's just, it's not here. We have a statement that says, under 5.2, profit sharing, provided that its operations from the venue generates at least an 8% profit margin to the licensee shall make an annual payment to the city no later than 120 days, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what's an 8% profit margin? Please describe what a profit margin is, what numbers go into it. To me, not to be cynical, but again, black and white, that number can be fudgeable. It's like, what does that mean? And, to go along with that, 5.5, I would say, city information rights, I think we need to have, the last, sentence here. In addition, the licensee will meet with a designee of the city on at least an annual basis each January to discuss revenues and expenses and all that business. I think at least biannual at the beginning for the first 5 years of the contract. We need to keep close tabs because this is all new. We don't know how we're doing, what the numbers look like. So financials are a big concern. Not a surprise. There's no mention of sustainability procedures or features or the environment here. And it was part of Ruth Eckerd's proposal that you are good environmental stewards, you're part of, Ocean Allies and certifications and all that best practices, but there's nothing in black and white. It's not acknowledged or mentioned at all. And then the last one is the fencing that Councilmember Teixeira brought up as well. And part of that exchange here is all like, what? I've got no visuals, so we're missing attachments, we're missing you know, we don't call them attachments here, what do we call them? Exhibits. Yeah, they're not here. And so to say to us, well, the fencing is only going to go around here and all that business, it's like, around where? I need to see, and more importantly, residents need to see that. I need to have and it needs to be in black and white, I think. You know, barring problems, you know, that may arise, and we can be flexible with that, but this is a public venue, it's got public bonds, and it needs, you know, we have $30 million in public bonds for a facility that is supposed to be publicly accessible. It better be publicly accessible, you know, most of the time. You know, from my interactions with the public, I think certainly you're going to have fencing when you're set up and when you've got a program, an event going on. But other than that, I think people need to be able to walk back and forth and under that canopy, and, you know, I can't envision the stage right now, and maybe that's on one of the attachments, but, you know, if that stage is just concrete or something and you've got all of the gear locked up, which should probably be locked up, number one, to protect it from theft, but also to protect it from the elements, then I see no reason why our public couldn't go up and little kids can twirl around on the stage. I mean, I don't know about that. I have a couple of data points. I have like Pritzker Pavilion in Chicago that the last time I was there was fully open when it's not used. So I don't have as many data points as you all do. But I think the visuals of having it locked up 80% of the time is not good for taxpayers who have spent, so that we've gone into debt for this park, this venue. So those are my concerns. The sustainability features and environmental concerns. Again, this is the crown jewel, I feel, of Pinellas County, this location. You know, Clearwater is a phenomenal city, and this location is that crown jewel. It's also the most vulnerable, right there next to the water, and it's going to be the most heavily trafficked. And so we've got to have environmental protections right down there at that park, and they got to be in black and white. And so I do trust you. I think, you know, you've been a good partner in the community, and I'm fully on board. I'm just more about black and white. And I get that we're up against the wall, and that might not be your fault, but it's inexcusable that this conversation hasn't happened 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago.
Ms. Crockett, I don't think all this is directed at you
It's
or
not,
staff,
it's not, it's
even
not.
though it seems like it.
But it's not.
And, you know, the numbers, I mean, first of all, you don't have a facility with any track record yet. So some people are not as familiar, obviously, with performing arts venues. There is a point where you have to get to stabilization, and that takes time, first of all, for promoters to even know the venue exists. So I just want to put that out there. As far as some of the numbers, there were almost no numbers today. I find a little ironic, Vice Mayor, about Ready for 100. Almost no numbers whatsoever, and we're making a commitment. So
We have
I
major
find it
major numbers on that. I
We're
would
not in the
disagree.
presentation today.
Yes, there are numbers
So I
there
find
about
it a
millions
little
of return.
disingenuous.
Nope, I can't allow
And
that.
if you need
We can
help on
disagree.
what a profit margin is, we can talk later. I'll work on that. Councilmember Bunker, and then I'll let you.
I think the Vice Mayor's concerns are good concerns that I share with her. And it is scary not seeing numbers. Also, Councilmember Techeda's comments about the fencing and the parking were also issues that I had. I will say this about the Sandcastle and Osceola. I don't believe that they should be included in this contract either. The contract as it's written now calls for the current level of ingress and egress to the Sandcastle and Osceola. Well, the current level is wide open. It's a quiet street that they have to themselves, essentially. Are we committing to having it wide open for them? I don't think we are. And I understand that Scientology has a litigious background. So if we have it in writing in a contract, I would say that they'll probably be trying to enforce what's written in black and white. So I would suggest that we remove that because the same should apply for all businesses around the amphitheater. And the fencing is something that I'm concerned about as well. As far as little kids getting up and twirling on the stage, I know how easy it is to fall off the edge of a stage. So I'm not sure that the stage itself can be open to the public to be wandering on, as much as I would enjoy it. But that's what concerns me. We don't have an idea of if the space under the awning is going to be open for people to enjoy. How do we fence off the stage itself to keep people from getting near any equipment? So there are lots of concerns that need to be addressed, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Mr. Margolis, can that language on the sandcastle be struck? Where did it originate from?
The city manager requested the addition of that item Wednesday evening. It was not in earlier drafts. I do not believe it was requested by Ruth Eckert, as far as I know.
Actually, it is.
It was, yes.
What we had proposed is similar to what we do when we have festivals down on Cleveland Street, is that we close the traffic to local traffic only. And the reason we do that is because that is going to be where all of the trucks come through and they're bringing to the backstage area. That's the one access point. And some of them are going to have a place to park. And there's no accommodating for trucks back there. So our request was, can we close that and leave it open to local traffic only, which would be the residents or the visitors to that property there, and then allow us some space to be able to park trucks there that we need to. So there would be emergency access as well as for local traffic. That's where it originated.
Mr. Jennings, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would. So at venues like this, there are almost always traffic mitigation issues. And certainly with a venue of this nature, the operator will need to have space for tour buses, trucks, any number of other vehicles. So therefore, what was requested is that the south side of Drew Street be closed off in order for them to be able to use that for parking for their various needs. The north side of Drew would remain open as an access point for that property. And that is the only reason why this is in the agreement, because of the request. And frankly, it's an understandable request.
And Ms. Crockett, do you want to address the pro formas and
Sure.
how a facility
I
becomes
would be happy to.
stabilized and what
Absolutely.
expectations are?
So I think it's important to understand the structure of the agreement is highly unusual. Typically, when a municipality owns a venue like this, they hire an operating company, they pay them a management fee, and then the city is responsible for all the expenses. At the end of the day, any profits that come from leasing the building go back to the city. And so the company that you hire in is literally just managing the day-to-day of the property and being its leasing agent. This is completely different because Ruth Eckert Hall is coming in and we're saying there's no management fee. We're going to program the day-to-day, your guaranteed product that's coming in, and that we have a revenue stream that's provided so that there's a money flow to help offset the debt service, as well as to provide money for a reserve fee for future needs of the building. I need to clarify, the maintenance, we are responsible for the day-to-day maintenance. We are also responsible for everything, down to the mowing of the grass. We are responsible for the cost of everything in that facility. We carry the liability for the facility. We are bringing in $2.5 million worth of assets, which I hope to order next week if the council approves this agreement. So we have significant responsibility for the costs that are going in here. And when I met with Mr. Jennings, the idea was, how do we have the freedom to operate this venue in a way that we can make use of our efficiencies and at the same time provide a revenue stream back to the city. And I think it's aggressive. The fact that we're trying to get to that $2 million mark in 3 years is aggressive. And it's going, and because it's built, that model is set on a per head coming through the door. So I understand the concerns, and it is a conundrum, because on one hand, we're hearing we need it to be financially, we need a good revenue stream coming back to the city, and on the other hand, we need to be sensitive to the community, and we need to make sure that it's available to the public. So Ruth Eckerd Hall is in the position where we're just trying to get a sense of what it is and balance that, and I think we are sensitive to that. I want to address the community events, because there are, I think we use the word community interchangeably, and in my mind, you have city events, which are the 12 dates that the city has access to the building for events. Then you have our Ruth Eckerd Hall community events, which we do, like Shakespeare in the Park, things that we produce, Miracle on Cleveland Street, school time performances down there, and we also have partnerships. And I think the partnerships are really important because we've already met with Jazz Holiday. You've got a number of legacy events that are used to being supplemented by the city. I understand that that subsidy is going away. This is expensive. It's expensive to have an event in a venue like this. And so we don't want to see those events go away. But to me, it's a potential for a deeper partnership, because a lot of these organizations, their missions align with us. So when you look at Jazz Holiday, that relationship is going to change completely. And I've already spent a lot of conversation time with Steve from Jazz Holiday figuring out how do we do this in a way that's feasible for you and that we cover the costs. So that's the kind of partner we're going to be, both for Jazz Holiday. The Hispanic Festival is another one where we've already started those discussions. There are also community events that we'll be working with Parks and Rec. I've had conversations with Chris already about ideas about collaborations between the park side and the venue side. So those things are going to happen. And then the last one is the recreational activities. There's no reason that this venue can't be used for recreational activities. My question, and I don't see it as insurmountable, is to work with the Parks and Rec on how do we do that? What does that look like? Because there are going to be costs involved with this. And as it stands right now, Ruth Eckerd Hall is responsible for everything that goes on in that park. Right? So it's just there are a lot of things that are going to come up that we're going to work through. I have every confidence that we can. I think the intentions of both. The one thing I've learned in this process is that we are of like mind in terms of the intentions of what we want this to look like for the community. What I like about this, the way this agreement is written, is that it is open and it is flexible. There's a minimum number of events that we must produce, but on the other hand, it is still open to the community to determine, whoa, that's too many things going on, too many people coming downtown, versus we need to have more events because we need to have more revenue coming in. It's that balance that we have to find, and I don't think any of us feel comfortable today saying this is the balance that needs to happen there.
Well, I hearken back to the Capitol Theater agreement, and it went through a number of iterations and amendments over time because it was a learning curve. The old theater was decrepit and was not the right type of venue for a lot of the events that you have today, and that's why it went through an evolution. I would anticipate that there will be some evolutionary changes at the facility and the agreement as well, as you get more comfortable with the type of events you're going to be actually underwriting, and then also how the community wants to use the facility in the off hours. One of my questions, and all of my notes have been erased, so I don't know what happened with my, which is frustrating, but such is life. I'll redo them between now and Thursday. If we do have it open more, you're carrying the liability insurance, and if things do in fact get damaged because we're having it open all the time, then I think we need to maybe alter the agreement in that respect, because it shouldn't necessarily be on Ruth Eckerd. And just also understand about, unintended consequences. So when you have that open all the time and it's covered and there's nice breezes, let your imagination run wild. I think we'll have a lot more homeless down there that are going to utilize it as their comfortable space. So, Mr. Jennings?
Yeah, Mayor, I did want to address the timing. A few of you have talked about the timing. This was, by the nature of what we're trying to do here, was a very difficult process because, as I said earlier, we do not actually have a venue. There are various seating charts that have been created, I believe. We have a seating chart, if you will, based upon the construction diagrams. So the mere fact that I know in our conversations you've talked about different ways in which you would set the venue up depending upon what the event is. So, and that's part of the flexibility that's built into the construction of the venue. So this has not been, it's not as if there was an existing venue and we just said, well, here are the keys and here are the parameters. I mean, there's a lot that went into these discussions. And as you can see from the agreement, we were trying to get into the weeds and into great detail. So there was no misunderstanding as to how the operation licensing agreement would work between the city and Ruth Eckerd Hall. So that does take time in order to move something like this forward. So I wish that we had more time in order to bring it forward earlier, but there were a lot of changes that were being made on both sides, going back and forth, a lot of discussions. So, and then of course, Ruth Eckerd needs to have some type of determination as to how you're going to operate going forward.
Councilmember Teixeira.
I want to thank you, Susan. It's a tough spot that you're there. And I really appreciate you have certainly taken care of some of my concerns, and you've spoken very well, and again, thank you so much for clarifying so much.
Anything else before Thursday, Vice Mayor?
So just to be clear, so on May 19th, we voted to begin negotiations with Ruth Eckerd Hall. It wasn't until July 26th that there was a first external meeting that was held about this contract. So there's, it's been 7 months to develop a 15-page contract with no work session discussion or guidance about our expectations of what that should be, what we're looking at, no, opportunity for residents to weigh in on a public discussion of what that might be and look like. And so, yes, I'm sure these things take time, but, whatever. I think it doesn't take 7 months to develop a 15-page agreement. I would ask, can you speak at all to the sustainability concerns when we had people packed in this room with white T-shirts that talked about, good public partnerships and good stewards?
Absolutely, and I can tell you a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're looking at. One is single-use, getting rid of single-use products, which is using a recyclable system, similar to what they use. It's familiar with that. Of course, the use of what kind of products we're using, biodegradable products, we're on board with 100%. We've also looking into a company for waste management that turns it into reusable energy, so we're looking at that. We are open to other suggestions, ideas. I know that you have a sustainability coordinator that we would absolutely be working with, so anything we can do operationally, we're on board with.
But you're not on board with putting it in a black and white yet, right? So you don't want to put that we are going to have only 100% biodegradable products and no single-use products, single-use plastic on that venue property. Will you put that in black and white?
I would agree to putting down, when you say no plastic on the property, I would need more information
Well,
on that.
no single-use plastic,
Right.
that aren't being bought and sold. I mean, if somebody brings a single-use plastic thing on property, whatever, but,
Right, I would put down in black and white that we are willing to work with the city sustainability to come to, I'm very happy to do that.
but working with is one thing, but requiring all artists and all vendors to only have biodegradable is something further, right? And so, again, the conversation is, it's fine, we're having this conversation, but it does come down to legally, black and white, right? As far as enforceable and protecting the city and the city's financial interests. Those are my concerns. I would, maybe ask Jay Ravens, our finance director, if he wants to weigh in on, the risk to the city without having a lot of numbers here financially, especially with that debt payment, the bond payment, our $2 million a year or so.
Jay Ravens, Finance Director. You'll recall that we had Web Consulting do a pro forma, a detailed pro forma on the operation of the amphitheater, per their level of expertise. That pro forma, per my recollection, indicated about a $1.5 million operating loss that we would incur if we were operating the amphitheater, based on the conservative method of utilization. This agreement, from my perspective, is very much of a win-win for the city versus where we were. We are taken out of the risk issue pretty much for the most part, in that we're not operating it. We're not worrying about whether we can make events profitable or whether we're going to lose money on events, other than the events that council chooses to sponsor, and those will be transparent. You'll approve those separately, so it'll be out in the open. The fact that we're getting a guaranteed return, when I say guaranteed, it's a per ticket charge. Whether that achieves the $2 million threshold, to me, is a goal. But if it achieves half of that versus the $1.5 million loss that we were looking at for the web study, to me, this is a very positive. If that's a $2.5 million swing on an annual basis versus what we were considering at a point in time. So from my perspective, minimal risk in that we shouldn't be losing money on the amphitheater operations unless Ruth Eckert walks away from it, and we have to take it over ourselves. But we have an operator who's taking on all the risk, guaranteeing us a per ticket surcharge. That's money that we can be used towards the capital maintenance, and also help offset the debt service costs that we had already assumed, to the degree that it's there. So to me, it's a positive, and how positive it is, if it achieves the $2 million, I'll be thrilled. If it achieves $1 million, I'll figure that we're in a much better position than what we were previously.
What about the phrase, that section 5.2 about the venue generates at least 8% of profit margin to the licensee shall make, how would that look like if you are going to be the 5.5 city information rights, that you're going to review the financials annually or biannually or whatever? What are you looking at?
Ultimately, bottom line, net profit. They publish financial statements. We'll have access to that information. January might be a little early. We might need to drag that out until they have their financials published. But we'll have the ability to review both their compilation and also their audited financials to drill down and get a comfort level with what the profit was on that particular operation. So I'm comfortable that myself, internal audit, that we can go in there and get a reasonable assurance as to whether they've achieved that and whether there's additional money due the city.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Ravens, one other question.
Yes, sir.
Any other segments of the park, are they generating revenue?
Not to my knowledge.
So they're just cost centers?
Correct.
And just one more thing for the record, because a word was said earlier, Ruth Eckerd Hall does not fudge numbers. They have audited financials every year, and they take it very seriously. So, Mr. Jennings?
I just wanted to remind the council that while the present discussion is about any revenue from Ruth Eckerd, we also have the sponsorship revenue, which the estimate right now is between $300,000 to $400,000 a year, just the naming rights alone. So and we'll provide that information so you can see it again.
And the more successful the venue is, the more valuable the naming rights are. So, any other questions at this time? All right, thank you, Ms. Crockett. 6.1.
Approved purchase order Ergo Flex Systems and Concept Seating Government of Brookfield, Wisconsin for the purchase and installation of dispatch consoles and workstations.
Good morning, Dan Slaughter, Chief of Police. This item is to replace some of the furniture within our communications center. The communications center was part of the main station when it was first opened in 1997, so all the furniture is 25 years old. The particular function of this center makes it used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so it sees a lot more use than your regular office furniture. In addition, it's specialized, and things have changed over the course of the years with additional technologies and resources. So this will replace and provide 14 new dispatch consoles and workstations, and then 5 training workstations and chairs to go with 14 new stations, and also replace the carpet. We were slated to get the carpet changed last year, but I deferred that so that we could do it all at one time. It is a raised concrete floor, which requires specialized carpeting, and so we didn't want to remove the furniture, put carpet in, put the furniture in, then replace it again in a couple years. So we deferred that a year, and we're hoping to get it all done now. There's a couple nuances to this particular purchase. We're using 2 different piggybacks. The company that's providing the workstations and the installation of the carpet is Zybex, which is a well-known manufacturer for this particular piece of equipment, or this particular specialized furniture. And they are listed on the NASPO, the National Purchasing Partners contract. So we'll be piggybacking that for $336,881.41. And then also the piggyback onto the Houston Galveston Area Council for the chairs, which is $22,652. In addition to this, we're also seeking to let Zybex handle the freight and the installation and the removal and disposal of the old consoles. That is done as a authorized or impractical to bid particular situation. So that totals out for $50,070.50. And then also similarly $20,972 with Zybex to handle the removal of the old carpet, the disposal of the carpet, and the acquisition of the new specialized carpet. All these items were kind of anticipated, of course, and available through the capital improvement projects to get funded, and we'd be more happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the chief? Chief, are there any of the workstations, do they allow for standing desks?
All these will have they will raise up, and that's one of the new technologies that the current ones do not have.
Yeah.
So they're definitely looking forward to that. They also have climate control. I know that sounds probably a little silly, but because of the servers and electronic equipment, those rooms get very, very cool, actually, because the air conditioner cools it way down, so this allows them to kind of have their own temperature, so. Sir.
I use a standing desk all day long.
Yes.
Couldn't live without it. Consent?
Yeah. Thank you.
7.1.
Approve the final plat for Airport Drive Villages located on 514 Brandon Avenue.
Good morning, Council. Kyle Vaughn, Public Works. This proposed plat will create a 6-lot subdivision on approximately 1.4 acres and will dedicate no additional rights-of-way or easement to the public. And I'll take your questions.
I hate to ask this question, but has this been noticed properly?
Has this been what?
Noticed properly?
To the residents around, so they all know.
Oh.
Comment.
Our last plat, we had an issue.
Right, not sure.
Okay.
I hope so.
Other questions? right, consent.
Yeah.
8.1,
Authorized purchase order to Bureau Veritas North America, CAP Government, Inc., and Joe Payne for code inspection and plan review services.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kevin Garrett with Planning and Development. This is for approval for purchase orders for our new contracts that we got bids on in October, November. And this is for our contractual services that give us extra help in plans review and also in inspections for building department. Any questions?
questions for Mr. Garriott? Vice Mayor?
Can you give any perspective, like, if we had someone hired full-time, would this save us more money, and would that person be able to, this isn't just a one-off thing to get caught up, right? This is because we can't hire a
Yeah,
person to
we've
fill a
got some
position?
open positions right now, yes. Mhm. And so, yeah, that's filling those positions with these contract services.
I'd like to understand the differential between hiring a contractor and having a full-time employee. How much more are we paying for contractors?
Okay, we can get you that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? Do you want that information before Thursday and leave this off consent?
No, I mean, we need the work done, right? But I just would like to know, how much does it cost us each time we have to hire contractors versus trying to get somebody hired? Do we need to, again, raise starting pay and all that business?
Right.
Ms. Clayton is coming up.
Nope.
Yeah, I just want to address that this also, in addition to addressing vacancies, it also helps us provide inspections and plan review as construction increases and decreases without the need of having to bring on someone full-time and then ultimately having to lay them off if there's not a work. And based on the workload that we've been experiencing for the past couple of years, we've had as many, and typically every day we have 3 inspectors helping our staff. So it's not, I just want to be clear, it's not just 1 or 2 employees, it's multiple that this contract funds.
Are you seeing a fall off?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
No. Not gonna do it.
Okay. Consent?
Yep.
9.1,
Thank you all.
Approve the acceptance of federal grants from Federal Emergency Management Agency for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Rich Gardner, Director of Public Utilities. The item before you today is for the approval of an acceptance of a FEMA hazard mitigation grant for raising of lift station control panels on Clearwater Beach. Raising the panels will protect the lift stations from flooding such as storm surge. The grant is for an amount of $462,000 with a city match of $154,000. And work must be completed by January 31st, 2024. I'm asking for your approval to accept the grant, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
any questions for Mr. Gardner, Councilmember Albritton?
Just curious, what height are you raising them to?
2 feet above the maximum storm surge?
So they're gonna be way up there.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if you've ever been to Key West, their lift stations are way up there. Probably because I'm interested, I noticed that. But
Yeah.
they're up there. We have to protect them from storm surge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how much does that add to the difficulty of maintaining?
The employees, they check them once a week. They may have to go up some stairs once a week. Just a little bit. It'll slow them down a little bit.
So they're not on ladders?
I mean, they're not designed yet. I prefer stairs, but we'll have
So
to
do
see.
I.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like an elevator personally, but it won't be an elevator.
Other questions? Vice Mayor?
What's the sequence of the lift stations? Is it the way they're listed there?
By sequence, you mean when we'll do?
The 8 lift stations, which ones are gonna be done?
Yeah, the sequence in which they'll be done would probably be determined by the contractor when we bid it, and we'd work with the contractor for something that made sense.
Consent?
Yep.
9.2,
Authorized purchasers Ferguson U.S. Holdings, Badger Meter, and Consolidated Pipe and Supply Company for the supply of potable and reclaimed water meters.
Rich Gardner, Director of Public Utilities. These water meters are stocked in the Public Utilities meter shop and used to measure potable and reclaimed water provided to our customers. There were 4 bidders for this contract, of which Ferguson Enterprises, Badger Meter, and Consolidated Pipe were the lowest responsible bidders for their awarded items. The contracts will be for a total annual not to exceed amount of $428,685 through December 15th of 2023 with 2 one-year renewals. I'm asking for your approval and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Consent? 9.3.
Authorize a purchase order to Chemtrade Chemicals U.S. LLC for liquid aluminum sulfate.
Rich Garner, Director of Public Utilities. The item before you today is for the award of a contract for liquid aluminum sulfate, or alum, which is used for treatment in our wastewater facilities. Alum is used to enhance settling in the clarifiers at the water reclamation facilities prior to filtration. There were 5 respondents to the request for bids, and we're recommending award to Chemtrade Chemicals in the amount not to exceed $175,000. This will be a 1-year contract through December 19th of 2023 with the option for 2 one-year renewals. I'm asking for your approval to award, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
10.1. Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Approve an amendment to that certain service and access agreement and Schedule D therein for the formerly known between the city and L3 Harris Corporation. Sorry about that.
Good morning, council, senior staff members. This is just asking for an extension of an extension. We asked for a 3-month extension to work out our tower agreement. At this point, it's at the level of the state. They got the agreement. They're pretty, good at what we come up with L3 Harris, as well as the city of Clearwater's legal team. They just have a process that they need to go through at the state level, and they needed another 3 months. Basically, is what they were asking for us. Another 3 months to go through it and then approve it, and then we'll be back in front of you again to ask for a 4-year, 6-month extension of the current contract. But I have good news. In the middle of that, we were also going to be talking about renegotiating our split between what we have as far as the tower agreement. On the towers, we split the revenue of people that are renting space on our tower. The original agreement back 19 years ago, was 75-25. Well, they offered 55-45, and we're probably going to counter that with a 50-50 split, but they still maintain the taking care of the tower and maintenance of the parties that want to rent on the tower. So that's a much better deal, to the credit to our assistant city manager for having us look into that. So we did have some progress, and we're just asking for an extension from the December date to the March date.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Consent?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jennings, anything to add?
No, sir.
Mr. Margolis?
Just briefly, just to update the council on Peace Memorial, we are ready to close with them. I've received and reviewed all the closing documents. They are asking to try and close this week if possible, which is quick. We need some signatures, so Mayor, I'll have to get with you as well as with the clerk because we have to do everything from attestation, notarization, etc. But if I coordinate that with you, the manager, and the clerk, we can potentially close by the end of this week.
I'm here, so we'll look forward to that. Item 13.1 will be discussed on Thursday. Any new business for future work sessions? Vice Mayor?
per our strategic planning, I think I'd like to discuss our thoughts on downtown land swaps at a future work session. I'd also like to have a presentation from the county about the use of about a third of our ad valorem tax dollars, especially related to housing and social services. So at our strategic plan, we had the discussion of staying in our lane. I can appreciate that. I'd just like some information about the county lane and what they are doing and what we can expect from those taxes that we pay them and how it's going. So I'd like that. I'd also like to have a presentation by the Director of 211 Services to get an understanding of what they're up against as far as dealing with Clearwater residents. And then, this Friday, just to make it, I'll mention it Thursday night, but I'll mention it now. The Suncoast League of Cities is hosting their monthly meeting at the Clearwater Sailing Center. So I think you guys all got an invite. Hopefully you can come. It's 11:30. And Ed Sherwood is going to be the guest speaker, and he's going to be talking. He's the director of Tampa Bay Estuary Program, so he can give us an update on red tide and other things that Tampa Bay Estuary Program does. And then finally, I think sooner than later, we should have on a work session agenda a discussion item to agree on annual goals. Both our city manager and city attorney proposed some annual goals. If we're going to go that way, as well as agree on a uniform evaluation form, hopefully, in January as well. I know that we should look at, our strategic plan and how that figures into the goals this year, but I just don't want to delay, I think. At least we can have an initial conversation. So those are the things I've got.
Councilmember Teixeira.
While attending the Barrier Island meeting, we were addressed by Mr. Dudley, Director of Federal Affairs, and I thought his presentation was great. Kind of talking about the implications of the last elections on local government, and I was wondering if we can invite him to speak to us. I already spoke to him, he's agreeable, but I would like for him to address us as well.
Scott Dudley?
Scott Dudley?
I think so.
Okay.
I just called Mr. Dudley, sorry, I didn't know his
It's
first
okay.
name.
I know who it is then.
Yeah, he had a great presentation, and I would like to hear him.
Jinx. Anything else? All right, we're adjourned till Thursday.